The morgue horror stories that you're about to hear will show you that death doesn't always mean the end. These are accounts from professionals who deal with the afterlife every day, but who at certain moments feel that something, or someone, is dealing with them. Like in the story you're about to see, where Noah, an experienced embalmer, receives a case that challenges everything he knows. A body in a deplorable state, a family insisting on an open casket funeral, and a series of disturbing events that begin when the deceased seems to resist his final preparation. But before we dive into the story, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying tales. Man, I've seen some crazy stuff in my years working as an embalmer. But what happened this week? That's gonna haunt me till the end of my days. My name is Noah. I've been working at the morgue for 12 years, and my husband, Daniel, always says I bring my work home with me. But this time it was literal. I work at a morgue here in the Midwest, in a place so isolated that even the wind seems to whisper things no one should hear. My boss, Lawrence, is a tough guy. He's seen it all in this line of work. But when he called me over that afternoon, the tone in his voice, my blood ran cold. Noah, we've got a tough case. One of the worst. He spoke softly, as if he was afraid someone or something might hear. The family wants an open casket. I already knew this wasn't going to end well. Open casket is asking for nightmares when the body's in normal condition. Imagine when it's... well, you'll understand. We went to the prep room, and when they pulled out the drawer... oh my God. The guy was 35, a car accident victim, but he looked like he'd been rotting for decades. His skin was wrinkled, pale, almost sticky, like it had been sucked dry by something. The scars on him? Nothing from the accident. They were deep, irregular, like they'd been made by claws. And his face. Part of his jaw was just gone, like it had been bitten off. Lawrence looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a mix of concern and fear. The family insists they want him presentable. I swallowed hard. How the hell were we going to pull off a miracle like that? But the worst part wasn't the state of the body. It was the feeling. That room was wrong. The air was heavy, the light flickering. And I swear, for a second, I saw the fingers of that corpse twitch. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy air of the morgue fill my lungs. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the restorative makeup brush. "We'll do our best," I lied, trying to convince myself more than Lawrence. But man, the moment my latex glove touched that body, it was like a dirty electric current ran up my arm. His skin wasn't just cold, it was slimy, like a layer of melted ice covered his flesh. And the smell, God, the smell. It wasn't the clinical odor of formaldehyde I knew so well. It was something worse. A mix of rotten meat left in the sun with something sweet, almost like rotting fruit. My stomach churned. Lawrence stood on the other side of the table, his facial muscles tense as he tried to align the dislocated jaw. I saw his fingers tremble as he carefully grasped the mandible, applying gentle pressure. Crack! The sound was sharp, too loud for the silence of that room. Lawrence jumped back like he'd touched a live wire, his face contorting in a mix of pain and pure terror. "What the hell was that, Noah?" He rubbed his hand like it was burned, his voice hissing through clenched teeth. I felt my heart pound against my ribs. What happened? It wasn't normal. He looked at the corpse's hand, then at me, his eyes wide. I felt like something bit my hand from inside his flesh. The air grew heavy. The fluorescent light above us flickered once, twice, casting dancing shadows over that disfigured face. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat go dry. I decided to try it myself. My fingertips touched the cold mandible, applying careful pressure to close it, and it resisted. It wasn't the normal rigidity of death, it was something active, like invisible muscles still worked beneath that pale skin. Worse, I heard it. A low creaking sound coming from deep within his throat, like something was laughing in there. I yanked my hand back like I'd touched a hot coal, stumbling backward. That's when I saw it. Tears. Thick, shiny, rolling down from the corners of those cloudy eyes. They weren't residue, they weren't from the embalming fluid. They were real tears, tracing down the decomposed cheeks and falling onto the steel table with audible little plinks. "Lawrence," my voice came out as a whisper, hoarse with terror. He's crying." My colleague looked, and I saw the moment the blood drained from his face. His lips moved without sound, his eyes fixed on that impossible sight. My whole body shook, every fiber of my being screaming to run, but some greater force, maybe guilt, maybe a macabre respect, kept my feet planted on the ground. With a trembling hand, I reached out and took the corpse's left hand, his fingers strangely warm under my touch. "Rest in peace, brother," I whispered, my words sounding hollow in that charged space. And then he squeezed back. It wasn't a spasm. It wasn't a reflex. It was a calculated, intentional grip, the bony fingers closing around my hand with a strength that shouldn't have existed. I screamed, a high animal sound that echoed off the tiled walls. Lawrence fell back, knocking over a tray of instruments with a metallic clatter. And then the eyes opened, not from that vague sleep of death. They snapped open, the pupils dilated and black as wells, fixed on me. The mouth moved, the torn lips parting to let out a sigh, wet, rotten, filled with the stench of death but undeniably alive. The sound filled the room, echoing like a curse before dissipating into the cold air. I didn't think. My body reacted for me. I spun on my heels and ran, my boots slipping on the waxed floor. Lawrence was right behind me, our footsteps echoing like gunshots down the empty hallway. We didn't stop until we were outside, under the pale moonlight, bent over and gasping like condemned men. "What the hell was that, Noah?" Lawrence was leaning against the wall, his hands shaking violently. "In 15 years on this job, I've never..." I didn't answer. My brain was still trying to process, every detail burning into my retinas. That grip, those eyes, that sigh. That's when Lawrence, with a voice trying to be calm but failing miserably, dropped the bomb. His name was Michael, 35 years old, terminal diabetes. He looked at me and I saw something new in his eyes. Guilt. The family, they were all in the car during the accident. The father was driving. My heart stopped. "You're saying that..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The image formed in my mind with horrible clarity. A sick man, a desperate family, a steering wheel jerked sharply on a dark road. That night at home, I was washing my face in the sink when Daniel came in, his face pale under the bathroom light. "Noah." His voice was strange, distant. "There was a man at our door today. Really thin, so thin. His face..." Noah. Part of his face was missing. Water dripped from my hands as I froze. "What? What was he wearing?" "A blue suit but torn, dirty." Daniel swallowed hard. He just stood there staring at me. When I opened the door, he vanished. Noah, he disappeared into thin air. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was as white as a tombstone. Because I knew Michael hadn't come by chance. He had a message. And to this day, when the night is too quiet and the wind howls at the windows, I sometimes wake up with a chill down my spine. And I swear I hear, just at the edge of my hearing, the sound of someone crying in the dark hallway. Some souls just refuse to rest. And after that night, I never looked at a corpse the same way again. Because now I know. Sometimes they look back. What a horror. What did you think of the story? Rate it from 0 to 10 and tell me what you think in the comments. Sometimes the dead don't rest, and sometimes they bring something much worse with them. Like in this next story, where a morgue professional discovers that the true terror isn't in what comes from death, but in what's still alive. Man, I've seen some weird stuff in the morgue, but nothing prepared me for what Brooks had in store for me that night. I was there, finishing up some paperwork, when he shows up at my office door, paler than a corpse in formaldehyde. "I need a favor," he said, his voice choked, like he'd swallowed a piece of cotton. I looked at him, suspicious. Brooks never asked for favors. The guy was like a machine, cold-blooded, professional. If he was avoiding something, it was because something was off. "What's up?" I asked, already feeling that chill down my spine. There's a body downstairs, an elderly homeless man. He's in bad shape. I can't handle it today. I've got some commitments. Commitments. Right. The lamest excuse he could come up with. But I knew he wasn't going to say more, so I just took a deep breath and agreed. All right, Brooks, I'll take care of it. He gave me a quick pat on the shoulder like he was afraid I'd change my mind and hurried out. And that's how I ended up alone in that autopsy room, staring at a body covered by a white sheet already stained with, well, you know. When I pulled back the sheet, my stomach did a 180. The old man was a mess. Greenish skin, parts of his face missing. It looked like some animal had chewed on him before he was found. There were bite marks, but strange ones. Not just from a rat or a dog. Something had bitten and torn. I took a deep breath, put on my gloves, and picked up the scalpel. Let's get this over with, I muttered, trying to ignore the smell. That's when I heard it, drip, drip, drip. The faucet was dripping. Weird because I was sure I'd turned it off tight. I turned to look and there it was, water flowing, like someone had turned it on. I approached slowly, that chill on my neck growing. And then I saw it. A rat. Huddled in the sink, looking at me with those beady black eyes. Gross? Yeah. But it wasn't just that. It was the way it was staring at me, like it knew something. Get out of here, you filthy thing! I shouted, banging on the sink to scare it off. It jumped and vanished. It didn't run. It didn't fall to the floor. It vanished into thin air. And the faucet? It stopped dripping on its own. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard I swore you could hear it. And then, something behind me breathed. But I was sure of one thing. I was the only living thing in that room. I didn't want to turn around. Seriously. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but I had to look. Slowly I turned. The corpse was still there, lying still on the table. Nothing had changed. You're losing it, I breathed, trying to calm myself. That's when I heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. This time the faucet wasn't dripping water. It was blood. Dark red, thick, slowly oozing down the sink. And the worst part? The faucet turned on its own, increasing the flow. Pluck, pluck, pluck. My body froze. This wasn't possible. There had to be a leak, some plumbing issue. But we'd never had anything like this before. Shit, I whispered, backing away. I had to hold onto the table to keep from falling. That's when I looked at the corpse again and noticed something was wrong with its mouth. It looked swollen, like there was something inside. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the retractor and opened the corpse's lips, and I almost threw up. Inside its mouth, stuck between the rotten teeth, were pieces of rats. Small bones, tufts of fur, decomposed flesh, like it had chewed on the creatures before dying. What the hell? I muttered, backing away suddenly. That's when I saw it. Something was moving inside. A rat, alive, black, skinny, with eyes shining like wet glass. It squirmed, pushing half its body out of the corpse's throat like it was coming out from inside it. I didn't think. I screamed, and I ran. I rushed out of that room like the devil was chasing me, nearly tripping over my own feet. I needed help. Someone, anyone. I found Davis in the hallway adjusting some papers for a report. "Davis!" I shouted, grabbing his arm. "There's something wrong downstairs. The body, the rats, the blood in the sink." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What the hell are you talking about, man?" "Come see." I dragged him back to the autopsy room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. But when we opened the door, nothing. The faucet was dry. The corpse, intact. No rats, no blood. Davis looked at me with pity. "You need some sleep, buddy." He walked out, shaking his head, and I was left alone again, staring at that body like it was going to laugh at me any second. "No, I saw," I murmured. But there was nothing now. I took a deep breath, rubbed my face. Maybe he was right, maybe I was just exhausted. I decided to finish that damn autopsy. I picked up the scalpel again, approached the corpse, and then it opened its eyes. The blade of the scalpel trembled in my hand as I tried to convince myself it was all just fatigue. The silence of the autopsy room was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the fluorescent lights. Then I heard it, a scratching of paws on the cold concrete floor. My eyes slowly lowered. The black rat was back. Standing in the center of the room, its thin, dirty body looked almost grotesque under the white light. But it was its eyes that held me. Black, shining, fixed on me with an intelligence that didn't belong to a simple animal. It sniffed the air, as if it knew exactly the fear coursing through my veins. A sharp crack echoed through the room. My whole body froze. The steel table creaked as the corpse moved. First it was just a tremor, then a violent spasm. Before I could react, the old homeless man was sitting up, his spine bending at an impossible angle. The greenish skin of his face stretched as his jaw began to unhinge, slowly dropping until it hung by strips of rotten flesh. I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. The rat twitched, its shining eyes blinking before it leaped onto the table. Its movements were agile, precise. It climbed the corpse's arm like it was a familiar ramp. For a moment, the creature hesitated at the edge of that open mouth, as if daring me to stop it. Then it disappeared into the dark throat. I heard the wet sound of swallowing. The jaw swayed. And then, the corpse smiled. It was enough to break my paralyzing terror. I ran, stumbling over my own feet, my soul slapping the floor as I left behind the room, the smell of death and something much worse. The next day, I handed in my resignation. Brooks never mentioned the incident. Davis swore there was nothing wrong when he checked the room. But I know what I saw. To this day, when the night gets too quiet, I swear I can hear the distant sound of a dripping faucet. And sometimes, on the edge of sleep and wakefulness, I see that smile, the unhinged jaw swaying, the rotten lips curving. I never set foot in a morgue again, but I have the terrible certainty that on some cold table, in some silent room, something is still waiting and smiling. Creepy, right? When you work with the dead, you expect the supernatural. But what if the danger isn't a ghost or a corpse, but something that shouldn't be there at all? The next story will make you wonder, who is really safe in a morgue? Look, I never thought I'd end up here. Seriously. But when you've been trying to find a job for months in a small town of just 5,000 people, the options, well, they aren't many. Either you become a cashier at the local grocery store, or you find work on a farm. And with my bad knee, I wasn't too keen on carrying sacks of corn. That's when I saw the ad. Caretaker for the municipal morgue. Decent pay, no contact with the bodies. It seemed too good to be true. And man, if I had known what was coming. But let's take it slow. I called the number, and before I could even finish my first sentence, the guy on the other end, someone named Mark, cut me off. "Come over now. I need to show you the place." His voice was dry, like he'd been smoking a pack a day since he was 15. He didn't ask about experience, didn't want references, just come. I got there late in the afternoon. The morgue was a low building, one of those red brick ones that seemed to have sucked all the color out of the world. The grass was overgrown, the windows dirty. You could smell the mold even from outside. Mark was waiting for me at the door, arms crossed. He was a tall, thin man with sunken eyes that never blinked. It looked like he'd seen so much that nothing surprised him anymore. "So you're the new guy," he said, more as a statement than a question. "Come on, I'll show you what you'll be doing." The tour was quick. First, the entrance room with that hard reception chair and a bulletin board of yellowed papers. Then the hallway, cold, lit by flickering lights that seemed afraid of the dark. He pointed to the door at the end. "The body room, you don't go in there, ever." His voice got deeper at that part. But what got me was his office. It was tucked away in a corner with a metal door, always locked. When we passed it, Mark quickened his step, like he didn't want me to even look in that direction. "This is just mine," he muttered. The tasks? Basically, I was going to be the handyman of the place. Mow the lawn, which was already turning into a jungle. Sweep the floors, take out the trash. Always at night after the truck passes, and receive the deliveries. "Deliveries?" I asked. He just stared into my eyes and repeated, Deliveries. When we got back to the entrance, Mark pulled a rusty keychain out of his pocket. "Start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late." And so, I took the job. But I should have paid attention to his smile when I turned my back. That thin smile of someone who knows you won't last a week. The first few weeks were normal. Strangely normal. I'd arrive early, mow the lawn that insisted on growing even on concrete, sweep the hallways, and spend most of my time on my phone or watching old TV in the reception room. Nobody ever came by, except for the garbage truck and sometimes a gravedigger coming to pick up a package. Mark was a pretty chill boss. The guy seemed genuinely lonely. Several times he'd show up with 2 sandwiches or 2 cans of beer for us to share, and he'd sit there telling me stories about the town that I'd already heard a dozen times. He had this kind of distant air, like part of him was always somewhere else. But there was one ritual he never missed. Every day at 8 p.m. sharp, he'd lock the reception and disappear into the body room. I'd hear the sound of running water, the shuffling of feet. He must have spent an hour washing every inch of that place. Then he'd be gone for about 15 minutes, and always come back smelling of cheap whiskey. I never said anything. Morgue work is tough, right? Everyone copes in their own way. Until one Thursday, everything changed. Mark was more agitated than usual. He slammed his office door hard, muttering something about always the same crap. When he went to the body room, I heard a crash, something breaking, and he came out with a red face, fists clenched. "I'm not cleaning today, you can go home early." And he stormed out, slamming the morgue door behind him. I was left alone. The silence weighed heavy. And then I saw it. The door to the body room was slightly open. I wasn't supposed to go in there. But there was broken glass. What if someone got cut later? It would be my fault. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. That chemical odor of disinfectant mixed with something sweeter. Something wrong. The room was cold, lit by dim blue lights. On the walls, steel shelves with bodies in black bags. And on the floor, shards of glass and a dark liquid spilling out. I grabbed a broom and started sweeping up the pieces of the bottle Mark had thrown on the floor. That's when I heard it. Click. A metallic sound coming from the shelf at the back. I stopped, looked. Nothing. Rat, I thought. I kept sweeping. Click, click. This time, clearer, like something was touching the zipper of one of the bags. My heart raced. It's just the wind, I lied to myself, even though there was no wind in that sealed room. And then, a rustling sound, something moving slowly in the bag closest to me. I nearly stepped on the glass shards as I ran out. I locked the door with trembling hands and stood there, leaning against it, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all. But then, I heard the footsteps. Someone walking on the other side of the door, and worse, knocking on it softly, like they were inviting me back in. After that day in the body room, I couldn't relax anymore. Every sound made me jump. The creaking of a door, the hum of the air conditioner. Even my own breathing seemed too loud in that silence. Mark noticed. He started looking at me differently, with that little smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Sleeping well?" he asked one morning while I was cleaning a foggy window. The question seemed innocent, but the tone was of someone who already knew the answer. And then came the blackout. One night while I was organizing some papers in the reception, the lights flickered and died. I was in total darkness, only hearing the low hum of the generator in the back. I turned on my phone's flashlight and went to the body room. It was the only place with emergency lighting. That's when I saw it. In the greenish-blue gloom, 2 large drawers, which I had never noticed before, were locked with new padlocks, and above them, a small security camera almost hidden with a blinking red light. My blood ran cold. Why the hell would someone film the dead? The next day, I found out the camera had been installed by a former employee. Crazy stuff, Mark laughed. He thought the corpses moved at night. But the way he avoided my gaze told me there was more to it. The final straw was when I forgot my phone and wallet at the morgue. I went back there in the middle of the night, my heart pounding. The place was dark, silent, wrong. The door to the body room was slightly open again. This time, there was no escaping it. I needed that wallet. I entered slowly, the phone's flashlight trembling in my hand. And then, I heard a moan, low, muffled, human. My body froze. The sound came from the locked drawers. With sweaty hands, I grabbed some pliers from a bench and broke the first padlock. What I saw made me fall to my knees. Inside the drawer was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 18, bound and gagged. His overalls were dirty with soil, his boots stained with something dark. Blood? He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes and moaned again behind the cloth. "Oh my God!" I broke the second padlock. Inside was an older man, about 23, wearing a fake police uniform. You could tell by the shoddy stitching. He was also bound but seemed weaker, almost unconscious. And then I saw what was on the floor, near the drawers. A photo. My photo. Me, in a firefighter's helmet, taken months ago when I did a basic course. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I was next. The muffled moans of the two men made me act before I could even think. My hands were shaking, but I managed to untie the boy first. He fell out of the drawer, gasping, his wrists bleeding. "Is there anyone else here?" I asked quietly, already working on the fake cops' ropes. The younger one shook his head, his wide eyes fixed on the door. He'll be back any minute," the boy choked out, his voice hoarse from screaming. The sound of a car pulling up outside confirmed the worst. There was no time for explanations. I dragged both of them to the back of the room, where a service door led to the back of the morgue. The fake cop, who turned out to be just a theater student I found out later, could barely walk. I carried him almost on my shoulders while the boy led the way. The last thing I saw before we fled was Mark's office, the door slightly open. Inside, on the wall, dozens of photos were pinned, all of young men in different uniforms, a trophy wall. I never went back for my things. I never reported it. Who would believe the new caretaker over the morgue owner? I moved to another city the following week. Sometimes when sleep won't come, I still hear the sound of those padlocks being opened. And I wonder how many drawers Mark filled after we escaped. How terrifying. Some places hold secrets so dark that even the living can't escape. But what if it's the dead themselves who seem unwilling to accept their fate? In the next story, a security guard discovers that sometimes the inventory doesn't add up, and the reason will make your hair stand on end. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories. So go ahead and like the video to let YouTube know you like this kind of content, and don't miss any more horror stories. Let me tell you something that still haunts me to this day. Something that happened back in the 90s, when I worked as a security guard in that old hospital. You know those buildings that look like they're straight out of a horror movie? Well, this one was worse. The peeling walls, the endless corridors that echoed even the smallest noise, and that yellowish lighting that made shadows dance on the walls. But the worst part was my job. I had to check the morgue. Every night, every 2 hours, I'd go down to that freezing basement. The air was so cold you could see your breath forming white clouds in front of your face. The smell was a mix of disinfectant and something heavier, something that stuck in the back of your throat and wouldn't go away, not even with water. My job was to check each drawer, compare the tags on the corpses with an inventory list. It seemed simple, but nothing in that place was normal. For the first 2 months, it was quiet. Just the silence, the still bodies, and the distant hum of some rusty equipment. But there was one thing that always made the hairs on my arms stand up. The call button for room 3. It was an empty room, no equipment, nothing. Yet every now and then that damn beep 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 would go off on its own, cutting through the silence like a scream. The maintenance crew said it was a wiring issue, that the building was old, and these things happened. Tried to believe them. But every time I heard that sound, my stomach would churn. Then came my last night. I had a job interview early in the morning, a new job far away from that place. I decided to do the morgue check half an hour early so I could leave sooner. Biggest mistake of my life. When I opened the door, I immediately felt something was off. The air was colder than usual, like I had stepped into a freezer. And the light in room 3, which was always off, was on. But the call button, which always went off for no reason, was now silent. That's when I heard it. Voices. They weren't clear, sounding like they came from far away, as if someone was talking from the end of a tunnel. And laughter. Hollow, lifeless laughter that didn't sound human but tried to mimic it. My blood ran cold. Then very softly, like a whisper coming from all directions at once, I heard, "He's coming." And another voice replied, as if it were a normal conversation, "He's early." My heart raced. I shone my flashlight into every corner, but there was no one. Just the metal drawers and that heavy silence, as if the air itself was watching me. Without a second thought, I grabbed my radio and called for backup. "Someone in the morgue. Repeat, someone in the morgue." The radio crackled, and the only response was a distorted whisper, like several voices speaking at once. "We know." That's when I saw it. On the floor, near room 3, there was a toe tag, one of those they use on corpses. The number matched a drawer I had just checked. With trembling hands, I started opening the drawers again. And that's when the real terror began. The bodies weren't in their right places anymore. I had checked everything 2 hours earlier. Everything was in place, but now half the corpses were in the wrong drawers, as if someone had moved them, or as if they had moved on their own. Then at the back of the morgue, the door to room 3 creaked open slowly by itself. Something was in there. My whole body shook as I moved deeper into that cursed room, my flashlight casting dancing shadows on the dirty tiled walls. The flickering light revealed something on the floor, a corpse identification tag, one of those tied to the big toe. My stomach churned when I saw the number, 307B, the same drawer I had checked not more than 20 minutes before. Sweaty hands opened the drawer with a metallic screech that echoed through the morgue. Empty. Completely empty. The body that should have been there was simply gone. I started opening the other drawers frantically, each one revealing a new horror. Bodies where they shouldn't be. Corpses switched around, some even in different positions than I had recorded. The old man from drawer 12 was now in 24, his mouth open in a silent scream. The young woman from 45 now lay in 17, her fingers twisted as if she had tried to escape. Then I heard it, a long, slow creak coming from the back of the morgue. The door to room 3, which had always been locked, was now opening inch by inch, revealing a darkness so dense it seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. Something was moving in there, something that breathed with a wet, raspy sound. Backup arrived minutes later, but it was too late. We searched every inch, cabinets, behind shelves, even inside the old decommissioned autopsy ovens. Nothing. Just the echo of our voices and that persistent smell of decomposing flesh that never completely left your nostrils. The older guard, George, tried to brush it off with a joke. "Seeing things, kid?" But I saw how his eyes lingered on room 3, how his hand trembled as he reached for the light switch. They knew. Everyone knew that place was wrong, but no one would admit it. That morning, I didn't even wait for explanations. I tossed my badge on the supervisor's desk and ran out of that hellhole. I got a new job at St. Mark's Hospital in the oncology ward. At least there, I thought I'd be surrounded by life, by hope. How wrong I was. The first few weeks were quiet until I started noticing things. Footsteps behind me when the hallways were empty. Shadows on the security camera monitors that vanished when I checked in person. And the patients. Some of them whispered about the man from the basement who visited them at night. The worst came when I found out about the window ritual. An old tradition, the nurses said. When a patient died, all the windows in their room were opened so the soul could find its way. But no one explained why. Sometimes, the windows opened on their own. It was on one of those nights that I saw it. I was doing my rounds when I heard the distinct click of a window being opened. Entering room 307, the same number as that cursed drawer, I saw the curtain billowing with the night breeze. And there, outside, standing in the garden lit only by the moon, was he. He wore a white hospital uniform, but it was faded, of an old-fashioned cut. His face. God. His face was swollen and pale, his lips pulled back in something that tried to be a smile. and he was staring at me, not with his eyes, because he had no eyes, just empty dark sockets. But I knew he could see me. Since then, I never close a window at night, because now I understand. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. And he's still out there, waiting for me, waiting to come in. How creepy. What did you think of the story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. Have you ever stepped into a place that feels alive? Not in a metaphorical sense, no. I'm talking about the kind of place where the air grows heavy as if it's being sucked into the walls, where every step you take echoes differently, as if something is mimicking your movements half a second behind, but coming from all directions at once. That's exactly how it feels in the basement of the old Blackwood County Hospital, a place that breathes when it thinks no one is paying attention. This hospital was once the pride of the town. Now it's an architectural corpse kept alive only by municipal budgets and the stubbornness of those who still work here. The smell is what gets me the most, that acrid scent of old disinfectant mixed with something deeper, more damp, almost like poorly preserved meat. But that's just the beginning. If you dare to venture down to the basement, past the creaking stairs that seem to say, "Turn back while you can," you'll find Corridor B, or as we call it, the Whispering Corridor. In official documents, it's just Storage Area B. But anyone who's spent a night here knows that this corridor has its own rules. The fluorescent lights flicker in patterns that defy electrical logic. The supply closet doors open on their own, even when locked. And the air, God, the air turns cold in specific spots, as if someone or something is standing there, breathing against your neck. At the center of it all is Susan fucking Whitmore, the morgue supervisor. If you've never had the pleasure, consider yourself lucky. Picture a woman nearly 6 feet tall, thin to the point of looking malnourished, with skin so pale it almost glows in the dark. Her eyes. Have you ever seen the eyes of a corpse after 3 days on the autopsy table? That's what they're like. Clouded, lifeless, but at the same time, attentive. The veterans tell stories that Susan never blinks, that if you put a mirror near her, it doesn't fog up, that she appears out of nowhere. One moment the corridor is empty, the next she's there, half a meter away from you, without making a single sound as she approaches. The worst part? No one ever sees her coming or going. She just is. Some say she's a ghost, others swear she's something worse, that she died during that flu epidemic in the 50s but simply refused to lie down. The truth is, no one knows for sure how long Susan has worked here. The records are confusing, contradictory, as if someone has tampered with them. Speaking of the epidemic, that's when Corridor B gained its fame. When the bodies started coming in faster than we could bury them, the basement became an improvised storage area. Piles of corpses wrapped in dirty sheets, some still warm when they arrived. They say not all of them were dead when they were stacked, that some were still breathing, moaning, until they stopped. To this day, if you put your ear to the walls of the corridor on certain nights, you can hear the echo of those last breaths. But it was with old John that everything changed. John Harris, the janitor who had worked here for 20 years, a tough man who laughed at ghost stories. Until that night, he was fixing a leak in the morgue when he heard it. It wasn't exactly voices. It was as if the very air was whispering, forming words that almost made sense but didn't quite get there. John said later that it felt like the walls were talking to him, whispering something that made his stomach churn. He followed the sound to Corridor B, and there she was, Susan, standing with her back to him, more still than the corpses she supervised. John said the air grew so cold he could see his own breath, and then she turned. Not her whole body, just her head, twisting at an impossible angle until those dead eyes met his, and when her lips parted in a smile that revealed very, very white teeth. John swore he heard her say something he refuses to repeat. The next day, John handed in his resignation. He never set foot in the hospital again, but on the rare occasions someone could get him to talk about that night, all he would say is, "She was counting all of us." After the incident with John, the atmosphere in the hospital changed. The jokes about the whispering corridor stopped. No one went down to the basement alone anymore. Some staff started crossing the entire corridor holding their breath, like children passing a cemetery at night. Susan? She continued exactly as she always had, working, watching, smiling that smile that never reached her eyes. Until the renovation came. When the city finally approved the budget to renovate the hospital, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. White paint covering the stained walls, new equipment replacing those machines that looked like they were straight out of a 50s horror movie. Even the air seemed lighter. But the basement was another story. They turned Corridor B into a modern storage facility. They tore down the old walls that held so many secrets, ripped out that linoleum floor that always seemed to stick to your shoes, installed LED lights so bright they hurt your eyes. On paper, the whispering corridor ceased to exist. But those who had worked at the hospital long enough knew the truth. Some ghosts don't care about renovations. The newbies laughed at the stories, of course. "Oh, cut it out with that nonsense," they'd say as they confidently descended the basement stairs. But it only took 1 or 2 nights on duty in the morgue for the laughter to die on their lips. It was always the same sequence. First came that chill down your spine, as if icy fingers had brushed your back. Then the unmistakable feeling of not being alone, even when the monitors showed the corridor was empty. And finally, the sounds. Murmurs so low they could be imagination, if they weren't always recognizable as human voices. Some you even thought you knew. Susan, officially she retired when the renovation began, but I saw the HR manager trying to find her documents to process her retirement. He never found them. No contract, no timesheets, no photo on the staff wall. It was as if Susan Whitmore had never existed, except in the memories of everyone who had worked with her. At the bar after work, when the alcohol had loosened some tongues, the stories would come out. I remember the first time I saw her touch a corpse, a necropsy technician would say, his fingers trembling as he held his beer. The skin changed color, turned paler, as if all the life left in it had been sucked out. "She knew things," a nurse would whisper, looking over her shoulder. Once I was alone in the dead file room and she appeared out of nowhere. She told me the exact number of the shelf where a record I'd been searching for hours was located. How could she know? I hadn't even said what I was looking for. The years passed. The hospital won efficiency awards. New doctors arrived, bringing new technologies and skeptical laughter for the stories of the morgue ghost. Until things started happening. The night security guard swore he saw a tall, white figure standing at the end of the storage corridor. When he approached, there was no one there, just an intense cold and the distant smell of formaldehyde. The security cameras showed nothing, of course. A newly graduated resident had a hysterical fit when she found a corpse sitting on the autopsy table. A corpse she swore up and down she had left lying down and covered. The marks on the soles of the dead man's feet suggested he had indeed walked. The worst was when they found old Dr. Henderson dead in his chair with an expression of absolute terror on his face. His notebook was open to a page where he had written the same phrase, repeated hundreds of times. "She is counting the living now. I still work here." Sometimes when I'm alone on the night shift, I feel that familiar presence. The air grows heavy, the smell of formaldehyde intensifies, and if I listen closely, I can almost hear the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the storage area. Susan never really left the hospital. And now, after everything I've seen, after everything I've heard, I think I understand. She wasn't a ghost, not exactly. She was something much worse. The guardian of the threshold between what we know and what we fear to discover. The whispering corridor may have been demolished, but the secrets it held, those are more alive than ever. And when the lights flicker and the temperature drops for no reason, when the corpses seem to change position during the night, when the whispers echo in the walls of the new storage area, well, in those moments, all of us, even the most skeptical, find ourselves wondering the same thing. Is Susan just watching? Or is she waiting? Waiting patiently for the day when each of us will finally enter her domain. Because in the end, all of us, living or dead, end up in the same place. And when that day comes for me, I know exactly who will be there. At that boundary between light and darkness, with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, and cold hands ready to receive me. So what did you think of our little trip down Whisper Corridor? If you made it this far, drop a "still here with you" in the comments. I love seeing who braves these stories with me. If that eerie vibe got under your skin, don't forget to hit like and show some love. It helps keep the channel alive for more twisted tales like this one. Oh, and if you're craving more, there's a video right over here that digs even deeper into the unknown. Go ahead, click it, let's keep the chills going.